Welcome to the next installment with our new mayoral candidate here in Ottawa, Nour Kadri. You are a professor at the University of Ottawa, is that correct?
Hi, Eric. Yes, I am a professor at the University of Ottawa. And, thank you for having me on your show.
And so what was the genesis of running for mayor? What made you have this idea and then decide to go for it in the first place?
Well, the city is in shambles, and like any other citizen and member of the city of Ottawa, you look at public transportation, you look at the poverty challenges, you look at inflation, you look at housing, and we've got a lot of challenges that are there. And people are complaining about it, and I thought, okay, well, I could either complain about it or roll my sleeves and be part of the solution. We've got some great ideas, we've got a vision, and we've been listening to the people, and we thought that we have some good offerings to solve those problems, and you do it for the right reasons.
Well, let's talk about some of those issues that are facing Ottawa, specifically the ones that concern us the most, right? Poverty, housing, all of these things, poverty on the rise and affordable housing on the decline. What's a way that we can deal with that, right? We're losing affordable housing at a very quick rate, and we're not building nearly enough affordable housing to make up for that loss. What is something that we can do? What do you think?
Well, there are a lot of things. If you want to synthesize the problem a little bit, a few years ago, I was the president of the Canadian Arab Federation, and I was working with them as a member of a group that they're called Colors of Poverty in Ontario. And it was mainly, it's got a lot of groups. In addition to the Canadian Arab Federation, we had the Chinese Canadian Legal Clinic, we had the Black Canadian Legal Clinic, we had the Assembly of First Nations. So we've got many people concerned about poverty, and we have seen that there are lots of dimensions to poverty, and some of it, and seeing some organized people more marginalized than others, mainly members of the BIPOC or members of the 2S LGBTQ, and so with these types of things, you see, okay, well, what is the problem? Where is it coming from, and how we should look at the solution? While poverty has all these dimensions, it's exacerbated by the challenges that we have in terms of affordable housing and the rise of cost of living in general, which is mainly we're seeing with the rise in inflation. Housing is a big challenge, and a lot of people try to think of it through one lens of the builders building houses, and they're making profit out of that, and we try to treat the builders as enemies, and I believe the problem is manifold rather than just one. The affordability crisis from a housing perspective has been long. And from an economics perspective, the number one factor in this is supply and demand. And there is not enough supply for housing. And the governments at different levels, they are seeing that. I mean, we've seen Prime Minister Trudeau having a new ministry for housing, and they're going to do good stuff. And yesterday, they're announcing that they're going to build 17,000 affordable homes and units, and that's a good thing. It's in the right direction, but that's not what we aspire for. Only there should be a lot of other things that could be done. We've seen Premier Ford coming up with strong mayor's powers for Toronto and Ottawa, and he has attached some of those to like building housing faster, and of course there would be other dimensions for that equation. But what we see in Ottawa is that there is a lack from the city of Ottawa in taking initiative from a governance perspective. We've got bylaws and laws in the city of Ottawa that are probably 20 years old. They're defying logic. They're not going with the new trends that are happening. I'll give you a small example. few weeks ago, I was golfing to support a charity, the Black Canadian Scholarship Fund. One of the people that I was golfing with works for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and he's overseeing a $300 million green affordable housing fund. Well, he was telling me 2 weeks ago, he was in Vancouver. The week before, he was in Halifax, and he's got partners there. There are no partners at the City of Ottawa. So you see an organization, you're headquartered in Ottawa, the money is there, the will is there, the initiatives are there, it's good for the environment, it deals with the housing crisis, it's for affordable cases, but who's absent? The City of Ottawa. Who's absent? Players in the City of Ottawa. So that's a challenge that we need to deal with. Another factor that we need to look at from an environmental perspective and a housing perspective together is there are lots of funds that are available out there by venture capitals, by infrastructure funds, by banks, to go into green housing. Okay, and that the more supply you will have in the market, the less the problem it's going to be. Well, guess what? Only 15% of that money makes it to the cities, and I doubt Ottawa catches to that 15%. So we need to look at best practices of city financing and see how we can have the proper vehicles in place, the governance vehicles in place at the City of Ottawa, in order to bring those monies that are available there. These are people who are investors, they want to invest. They're seeing a big trend in green housing, in affordable housing, and there is a social dimension to this that we could resolve an issue of affordable housing that is missing in action in the City of Ottawa and many cities around the world, mainly in Canada. So we need to think outside the box. We need to go beyond the conventional when it comes to financing these initiatives, and we need to cut red tape at the City of Ottawa, because a lot of people complain, especially small builders. I mean, you see somebody who bought a house and they're taking it out and they're going to build 5 units or 6 units on that out, and it takes them six months in order to get a permit. Okay? We need to be giving better leeways to these types of situations, because they are part of the solution and we are ignoring them. It's not just a checkbox that we need to look at. Look at what happened in the pandemic. I've worked in clinical research. I used to be the director of compliance and audit at Trialstat Corporations. We used to look at companies that are approving medicines and medical devices. The process is long. It takes 2 years probably to go through that process. When the pandemic hit and we realized this is a crisis, vaccines were approved in no time. There were a lot of aspects of the process that were cut down, okay? And we were able to bring this from 2 years into 6 months. Well, the housing challenges are there. The crisis is there. All that we need is those who are in power to press the right buttons and make sure that we can accelerate some of the possible solutions that are out there. And when elected as mayor, I'm going to be pressing those buttons.
And you mentioned local developers twice, right? And I agree with you that we can't look at them as the enemy, right? That they're not, the people causing this crisis. They're definitely profiting from it, but they're not causing it. So how do we work with developers, right? Do we say the city is going to fund 10% of the units in your new building as affordable housing? We're going to pay for that, because in a lot of ways, right, it's so expensive for somebody to be homeless, right? So expensive for the city, for the government, for us as taxpayers. We pay an awful lot in terms of policing costs, healthcare costs, all the rest of those costs. It's much cheaper to put somebody into one of those units, but a developer is going to be pretty hesitant, especially with people who have been homeless for a long time, to put somebody into one of these affordable housing units unless there's some kind of guarantee from the city. So is that something we
Well, that's one option, but we can look at a win-win situation. And the problem is not new. It's been there for a long period of time. Like about 2.5 years ago, I attended a panel that was held by Mayor Tory of Toronto, Mayor Watson of Ottawa, and Mayor Nenshi of Calgary, and was organized by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. the three mayors were complaining about the federal government funding that is coming to help homelessness. And the federal government is not looking at this from a strategic perspective. They were looking at it election to election, budget to budget, and that's not how the way it goes. Now, you remember Mayor Nenshi said that in order to eliminate the homelessness crisis in Calgary, I need $550 million committed over 10 years. Well, the government is giving me $50 million this year, and they don't know what they're going to give me next year. Mayor Watson was talking about a similar thing, that they're giving them some money, and they say they have to spend it before March 31st in the budget. And say, well, if you want to go and you negotiate with an old hotel, for instance, or a hotel that you want to work on it and buy it in order to make it an affordable housing units, when they know that the money is there and you have to spend it before March 31st, they're kind of stripping you of your negotiation power and to stretch that dollar to get something more with it. My approach to the solution would be different. I would go and negotiate with the federal government, the Ministry of Housing, with the provincial governments to work on a strategy over an 8-year period with some milestones on 4 years and 4 years, because this is something that people have been talking about since the 80s, and then this is becoming more and more and more. When I leave the University of Ottawa and I go on King Edward Street, I am looking every day and people that are homeless, okay? And I'm seeing a new notion and new trends that there are seniors that are becoming homeless. Okay? People with suitcases that are moving, and it looks like they probably cannot afford to pay rent anymore, or they lost their house because during that bubble in the housing market, wherever they were looking, the house was sold, and they're out now, and there's no place to go. The rent is becoming so high and the costs are very high. So we need to, again, think outside the box. We look at those builders and we talk to them. We say, okay, well, if there is a situation where you can build 10 stories, we'll give you the opportunity and bypass those laws and probably give you 15 stories in one hand, provided you can give us another building that is with affordable housing. And we can give you some subsidies from the city. We can give you some breaks on the new housing units from a taxes perspective. So if we can bring to the equation the 3 levels of government, and each one of them that is being contributed into a city-based approach. So we'll go to the Minister of Housing and tell them, okay, this is our strategy in the city of Ottawa. We need your contributions. We've done it for light rail, okay? The federal government has funded light rail. The provincial government has funded light rail, and it was like on a third by each one of those governments. I mean, 600 million from the federal government, 600 million from the provincial government. We should have a similar approach when it comes to housing, because the federal government cannot resolve that issue alone. It has to be localized into a city approach, and the city has to put a strategy in order to eliminate homelessness and have more affordable housing units in place.
For sure. Now, that's a long-term solution. You're talking about an 8-year plan, right, with benchmarks along the way and that kind of thing. What about a more immediate plan, right? I mean, we are in a crisis situation right now, tent cities popping up here and there in Ottawa, and then we send the police in to be the enforcement arm to take down the tent cities. You know, there's a real push and pull going on where people are desperate and there are more homeless than ever before. And all of a sudden we're in this crisis. What's something that maybe we can do in the immediate few coming months, right? As we head into the winter and it's going to get bitterly cold, what can we do in the immediate next few months to alleviate some of that in the meantime?
It is costing us a lot in order to deal with homelessness. When I see in many situations a police coming in and they're intervening in situations where they shouldn't be probably intervening, where paramedics should be intervening. So I see that there are situations where we're not looking at proper solutions in place. The city of Toronto, for instance, houses about 8,000 homeless people every day in motels. Okay, and that's a huge thing. For the immediate solution, we could do that. We've got more than 1,100 buildings by the city that are not properly utilized. We can transform some of those that can help in order to house people that are homeless. We can again partner with the federal government. Every day I look at those federal government buildings that I see them empty, and this is not new. This is a mismanagement in the situation. I remember a few years ago, one of my MBA students, he was a director with the federal government. He's in charge of about 80 buildings. He told me, Nour, at any point in time, we've got more than 40% of those buildings empty. And there is an optimization problem. If I've got 80 buildings and 40% of those are empty, I could probably consolidate some of them and I can free a couple of buildings in Ottawa that will be available for low-income housing or for affordable housing units, or in some other situation, city housing, or we can find a formula. The buildings are there, they are empty. All that we need is the political will, and I believe the federal government, the provincial government, and the city, they could work together, and they see it. Now they are transitioning into a model where the federal public service is going and is working from home. And we need to optimize those buildings, and many of those buildings, if the federal government is looking at building 17,000 units, well, guess what? In Ottawa specific, they could probably build those 17,000 housing units in other cities. And in Ottawa, we have a much better solution. We could transform some of those federal buildings that are empty, and they're going to be empty for some time, into affordable housing units until we have a fully fledged strategy to deliver on eliminating that homelessness crisis.
Yeah, I like that because yes, it's a simple and easy seeming solution, but it's not a long-term one, but it is in the short term something that we absolutely could do here in Ottawa, and I like that idea. Now you mentioned earlier, we have just a few minutes left here, so this will be my last question to you, but you mentioned earlier that the disproportionate number of people of color, 2S LGBTQ people who end up homeless, who end up in the throes of poverty, and there are a million reasons for that. And I will just give you a stat that I've been telling people in the last few weeks because it blew us away when we heard it. We did a survey at Operation Come Home, right? And ordinarily, obviously 2S LGBTQ people are much more represented in the homeless community than they are in the community at large, for a variety of reasons, youth especially. But we have an employment program at Operation Come Home where we connect youth who need jobs to, employers in the Ottawa area who are looking to hire. 40% of the youth in that program identify as 2S LGBTQ. And that's a staggering number here in Ottawa. So when it comes to, these marginalized communities, and I just found this out yesterday when I was doing a little more research into the election, right? So you got the mayoral election, that's what you're running for. There's city councilors who are running for their wards as well, but there's also school board elections. And there are a couple of candidates here in Ottawa who are running on a very specifically anti-trans school board platform, who are specifically running on the notion that we shouldn't be teaching any youth in school at all, any kids, about anything to do with gender or sexual identity. And certainly for the youth who come into our program at Operation Come Home, they have a situation in their school, in their home life, in their communities that's untenable for them. They end up on the street. This is only going to make it worse if we have more people doing this in our schools. And I'm just wondering if you have a take on that. Is there something that the city can do?
Absolutely. You're telling me you learned about this recently. I've learned about this a couple of years ago when we worked with the Colors of Poverty on that exercise. And we should have an anti-racism strategy in the city. I know Carlson King, the councillor for Reed Rockcliffe, he's done some good work in there. We need to kind of own it and make sure that the mayor implements that in a way that it kind of eliminates the discrimination that is happening for all groups. I don't want to look at this from a one group perspective. There are many marginalized groups, and all of them should be given the proper chance. Human rights should be universal, and we look at this through a human rights lens. And everybody who is running for mayor, they must acknowledge that. Once we acknowledge that the problem exists, we will look for solutions. And while you just mentioned there are some school trustees, they are running on some platforms that are probably not welcome. There are others that have loud voices in the other direction, and they're doing a great job. One of my closest friends that I've worked with a long time ago, school trustee Donna Blackburn. Donna has been a big advocate for to us LGBTQ communities and at ODCSP and many other places. And all that you need is to commend the people who do work to eliminate racism, and we need to do it in the city of Ottawa so that we don't leave anybody behind and marginalized. The second perspective into this is mainly youth. We need to look at youth differently. We're seeing a situation of mental health challenges that are taking more on youth. It was exacerbated more now with challenges that we've got with climate change. A lot of youth are like experiencing anxiety at universities because they think what the future would be holding for us. Others are going through other challenges. The opioid crisis is more challenging for us, especially with youth. The sites that are there to help, they are mainly in downtown, but mental health challenges and opioid issues, they're not only in the downtown core, they're many other places in the city. So we need to expand that outside the core of the city and make sure that we are present in communities. And this is part of a resiliency plan, offering services within 15 minutes for all citizens, including support for youth and mental health issues, addiction, and other related stuff. I was happy to see yesterday that the CRTC is acting on proposals from the federal government, and they're going to implement the 811 number so that people can have easy access to support for mental health in that perspective, especially for youth. Just like we had 911 services for emergency, 311 for city services, 988 is going to be 988 is going to be for mental health issues and other aspects. So I'm happy that we're moving in the right direction on this. As Mayor Kadri is going to build on these things and make sure that we go into a much faster agenda. We cannot afford to go slow on these things. And if anybody says that cannot be done, well, tell them this is what happened in the pandemic. This is how we were able to approve vaccines. We kind of stopped the red tape, the bureaucracy. Any process that used to take 2 years, we could shrink it into 6 months. And there is no reasoning why you cannot do this at the city level. All that we need to is to raise that red flag and say that this is a crisis, it's true, and we need to deal with it.
Absolutely. It is a crisis, and I hope that we can act on it extremely quickly. Thank you so much, Nour Kadri, candidate for Mayor of Ottawa, joining us today, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Eric, and I commend you on all that great work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, and best of luck with the rest of the meetings that you've got today. I know it's a crazy busy time, eh?
It is.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was great to meet you. And hey, what do you teach at Ottawa U?
I teach artificial intelligence and strategic management.
Okay, interesting.
So I'm mainly in innovation. So I teach both at both schools. I teach artificial intelligence in at the School of Engineering, and I teach management of innovation and strategic management in at the School of Management, and mainly in the MBA and executive MBA.
Okay, excellent. Well, terrific. 90% of my regular day job is speaking to university professors, so I feel like this is just an extension of that. It's terrific.
Thank you.
Eric, after listening to you during this call, you definitely have the voice of a broadcaster.
You are.
I was one for 17 years before I started working at the CPA. So I did the morning show on Shea 106 here in Ottawa.
Oh, beautiful. Good.
Yeah.
That's good. Always happy to meet you. And I'm one of the experts on call at the University of Ottawa. So I've done a lot of interviews with all kinds of media on various issues, mainly business, technology, and politics. And I look forward to working at the City of Ottawa in order to advance some of those solutions for dire problems that are there.
All right. Well, I do a podcast with the Canadian Psychological Association, and on occasion we'll have a subject that can't be dealt with by just psychologists. If something about artificial intelligence comes up, I'm calling on you, even if you're mayor at the time.
Anytime, I'll be more than happy to this.
Excellent.
There are some situations I teach because I love it, and I'm in it to move those experiences to the next generation. I said, even if I become mayor, I will teach one class at the University of Ottawa, and I will give its salary to charity. So
Excellent.
I'm in it.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I hope that happens for you. Best of luck with the rest of the campaign.
Thank you, Rick.